Everyone, a huge round of applause for Rick Schultz. Oh, there he is.
Thanks.
Yes. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I feel like I should wrap it up after that.
Yeah. Let's just go. Yeah, so it's only downhill from here. All right, so I put some questions down based on two things. This is interesting. One is, my conversations with Rick, but two, Mark, my associate's a big fan and was doing using AI to figure out the things we should go talk about and doing research on the company. There's a lot to talk about. So we'll do about 20 minutes of our conversation and we'll leave 5 for questions, okay? And if you're dying to ask one, well, just wait until there's 5 minutes left. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about, which anybody who's known me over the years is going to be surprised I don't want to talk about this, because it's really about the relationships and alignment. Because when I was talking to Rick, we met a couple times, I kept noticing that every time he was talking about major go-to-market decisions, moves, frankly, even down to the process they took to go decide on some of these moves, everything came back. There was always a founder as part of that process. And he'd always say, there was a lot of founders, so I can't remember all the names.
We do have a lot of founders, that is true. We have 7 founders, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be like, and this guy, And so I wanted to talk about that first. We got a lot of founders in the room. And as for Databricks growth, the role of the founders, what was that, and how did that make a big difference for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we have a lot of founders. We have 7 founders. I think that's a lot compared to probably most companies. There's 5 that are still to this day very involved in the day-to-day operations. The other 2 went off and started other companies like Perplexity and Anyscale. But there's 5 that are still very involved day to day. But I think it's partly because you and I were talking a lot about positioning, messaging, category creation, that stuff. Because I would say our founders, it's not that they were involved in every aspect of marketing. I didn't need them to be. I didn't want them to be. Frankly, I didn't want to be. But I think when you think about those early decisions, there's kind of 2 big things the founders need to be really involved in. And one is hiring whoever's going to lead and build the thing in marketing. So one is the people side of it, but at least getting that initial leader. So Ali spent a lot of time with me before they even offered me the job. I think our first meeting was a 4-hour dinner interview or something. But then the other thing that we spent a lot of time talking about is the positioning and messaging. And I think that's really important because what's more important than how you position your company when you're trying to be heard of, stand out, create brand awareness, drive pipeline, drive preference, interest in your company. And the way Ali actually always talked about, he didn't like the term product marketing, actually. He believed a lot in the actual people and the function, and I believe enormously in how important that function is. But he didn't like the term because he said it's so associated with product building something, throwing it over the wall, and then marketing figuring out what to do with it. And he just thinks product marketing, product positioning, product strategy, it's all one. You have to decide, this is how we see the market, this is the thing we're building that uniquely wins that market, and then here's how we're going to talk about it, and here's how we're going to build it. It's all connected.
I love that. All right, if you love that too, how about a round of applause on that comment right there? And if you're in product marketing, you should have been standing and given an ovation. But that's okay, we'll talk later. So the next one, you don't know this guy, but it's called the Robert Kaler question.
Okay.
Where's Robert? Yes. So Robert, this one's for you, because when I was talking to Rick, one of the things he kept pointing to was the audience targeting. And ensuring that they're spending their time and resources against the right companies and the right people, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to talk to you. Look, one of the things we have when we start a company, and even, I don't know if this really ever ends until you come to this sort of epiphany that you got to be more targeted. We believe we can sell to the whole world. And so that's, for us, can we help sort of talk about, you can't initially. And so you guys made really smart decisions about who you were going to target. you guys got, as you like to say, you had a set of stakeholders that were easily identifiable.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk about that a little bit? So we talk about targeting and what that meant for you guys.
Yeah, that's right. I do think it's really important to be kind of pointy about like who are your core personas who are going to use this product, buy this product. By the way, that might be different. There might be people who use it and people who buy it. But to have like a very small set of like clearly, crisply defined personas, if I ever hear like, oh, like if you think about, oh, anyone can use this product, I think a company of any size is going to have a problem doing that kind of marketing. But particularly when you're early on and you're nascent, if you're going to say, oh, we're going to run campaigns to anybody, that's like the least focused thing you could do, right? So I think it's really important to be pointy. Also, by the way, I even think like a slightly narrower version of anybody or everybody that's still too broad, in my opinion, is like when people say like, oh, it's for line of business or for C-suite. Those things are so broad. Like, I'm not saying you couldn't like market to a line of business or multiple line of business, but line of business is a bucket of audiences, so you still have to go down a notch and get more specific, like double click on that. Or even like C-suite, like I mean, I have like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 peers that have C-level titles, and we work really well together, we're all friends, but we have very different care abouts. You wouldn't market to our chief counsel or chief people officer or CFO or CIO exactly the same way you would message to me if you wanted to resonate, right? So being really crisp. Yeah, we had it, I don't like to say it's easy because it didn't feel like anything has been easy on the grind, on the journey building, but I would say it was simple in a way that like for us, at least in the early days, we just had like a 4-box matrix where it was like data science teams, data engineering teams. We target both of them, and frankly, we're trying to break down the walls between them, get them to work together more. And then we had the practitioners along the bottom row, like the users, the actual data scientists and data engineers, and then 1 or 2 notches up in management, like the directors, senior director VPs of data engineering, sometimes chief data scientists. But it wasn't until we were several years in and hundreds of millions in revenue where we kind of really started branching out, and we were like, okay, now we have enough like kind of wallet share and the kind of size deals we're trying to do. We're targeting chief data officers, CIOs, et cetera, and then we branch out into analysts and now some line of business like marketing teams, for example. But really, in the early days, it's important to stay super focused.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys stayed. There's often a resistance to marketing just to the users and the director level versus, hey, you got to get into the. I know you just said it, but get into the C-suite. But like it sounds like in the early days, you guys were okay and focused in that area, and then you branched out.
We totally were, because we had specific use cases, and those are the people who were deciding which products to adopt. Even the individual data engineers and data scientists, they were adopting the product, and then people deciding you would pick it for given use cases, right? It wasn't until you start getting into these conversations about being an enterprise standard or what have you. By the way, this will vary by product, of course, and by market. But we didn't actually target CDOs or CIOs until probably 4 or 5 years into my time there, so like high hundreds of millions in revenue, let's say.
Amazing. All right, so you came in at 10 mil, roughly, right?
And a little north.
11. Okay, so one of the first things you've talked about is like nailing the messaging and the brand. You even brought it up in the start. What was that process like? How important was that early on? And like, I think for a lot of us, that's like motherhood and out. Like we know, but we don't. I'm not sure we put in the same amount of rigor and focus that you put into it.
Yeah, that was the first thing I decided to focus on. So my whole first quarter at Databricks was pretty much, we need to figure out how we talk about who we are, what we are. And it does kind of take a quarter. Like, if you're at a point in your journey where you're like, we're not sure we've really nailed how we describe either our space or what our thing is, what we do, then it's probably worth like hitting the reset button and spending a quarter on it. And I've used an outside agency called Zoom Marketing before. There's other ones that do it if you don't want to pick that one, but I've used them multiple times. But like, it's good to have a rigorous process. Sometimes the outside party it's still going to be the internal brains that decide it at the end of the day. It's going to be the founders and the core people who know the strategy and the product and the market better than anyone else in the world. But getting some outside validation and having the rigor of a process, a forcing function, that forces, like, first of all, you get all the internal brains together, and then you kind of test with some customers who maybe have already adopted your product or know you pretty well. And then you start testing with prospects. And I remember, like, even in the early days, it wasn't just me. Again, it was the founders were putting the rigor in because it's so important. I remember Ali flew to New York with me. Our CEO flew to New York with me. And he almost wanted to jump through the glass in one of those focus groups, the two-way glass, because he was like, God, how come this guy doesn't understand that? But it's useful to see how people react to your message, because it's like, hey, we're out in the world now. We're like, we're talking to a data engineer at, I can't remember, someone from HBO or some New York-based company. And yeah, you have to explain. He does, just because he doesn't get unified data analytics in like the first 5 seconds. Yeah. That's what we're dealing with. So I think it's useful to have that deep, thorough process for like a full quarter. And then once you get it right, though, and you and I talked about this too. Once you get it right, and you feel like, okay, now we're ready to go with this, I think you can't change it very often. Like, I'm a big believer in not just message consistency, meaning you're telling the same story through all your channels, through your sales team, your events, presence, your website, all of it. But also, like, the stamina is important. I think people sometimes, you have a good customer meeting, maybe you want to tweak the messages. I think resist that to a large degree because it takes many quarters, many months and many quarters, and sometimes even years to hammer a message into the market because you're trying to reach a lot of people. And even once you reach them, think about how many times you have to tell someone something right before they actually, 7 or 9 times you have to tell someone the same thing before they actually internalize and remember it.
Right.
So I think you got to hammer it. You got to hammer it into the market for many quarters. And so I think you're better off if you don't tweak it, unless there's some major disruption in the industry or major competitive threat, or it's not working. I'm not saying never change your message. I'm just saying, just realize it takes many quarters to hammer it into the market once you think you've got it right.
All right. So this is the one everyone wanted me to ask you about.
Okay.
The creation of the lake house category.
Yeah.
All right. Take it however you want it, but my team wanted to ask about it. I'm sure a lot of people. We do get a lot of inquiry about creating a category, and you guys did it, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that and what you went through to get there and what it means.
Sure. I'm not a believer that everyone needs to create a category, by the way. I think there's many companies who've been wildly successful who have won their markets without really creating a category. A couple examples that come to mind would be I don't really think Tableau. I think very highly of Tableau's marketing. I think Elisa was there 12 years, did a phenomenal job. They got their customers to carry their brand for them into the market in a way that I hadn't seen anyone else do. They didn't really create a category, though. I would argue Okta is a great company, had great marketing, by the way, when Ryan had an 8-year run there. But I don't think they really create a category. Unless you call, identity as a service, kind of, but identity management had been around many, many years in the cloud. So I don't think you have to create a category. You have to have differentiated messaging and a clear, strong positioning, and you have to drive it in the market with message stamina. But we created a category, and there were some lessons along the way in the sense that we thought we were doing it before Lakehouse, actually. We thought we were creating a category for years with unified data analytics. And I kind of always, here's the thing we knew is that you have to condition the market. These are things you have to do whether you create a category or not, by the way. You have to condition the market around the pain. You have to get people to recognize and articulate, yes, I have this pain. They're nodding. Okay, we agree this is a pain. We agree that these other ways don't quite solve it. And then can I convince you this way is better? And here are some proof points and some customers and what have you. So that you do anyway, right? And we had been doing it for years around unified data analytics platform, which granted is a much clunkier term than data lakehouse. And we knew that, but at the time we thought, okay, these are the things that matter and the name of the category doesn't matter. Sure, VMware, when they created virtualization, that's a catchy name. It's easy to remember, it's one word. But there's other ones that have had successful categories. I would argue, if you ask what are the 2 categories Netflix created, you might get slightly different answers, especially for the first one they created, right? Or even iPad, tablet, it's the name. I didn't think the name mattered much, but it turns out the name does matter a bit. So when we came up with the Lakehouse, which was basically the same thing we've been talking about for 5 years, we conditioned the market that, hey, you can't have these data silos where structured data is over here, but you can't do any AI on it. And then all your data science and AI is over here, but it's not very structured. That's broken. And we've been conditioning that pain for years. But Lakehouse, people got it right away, number one. because it was a portmanteau, and they were like, oh, I see, data lake, warehouse, I get it, lake house. But also, we were provocative with it. I think the thing we didn't quite dial up till we did Lakehouse was how provocative we were. When we first came out with Data Lakehouse, I mean, you can go look this up. I think it's probably still findable on LinkedIn. When we first posted, like, people just slammed us. Gartner thought we were stupid. It's a lame, silly term, you know. And sorry, I know it's your former employer. But,
it's okay.
And,
please, keep going. Yeah.
They came around. They eventually came around. But at first they were like, I don't know if this makes sense. We're not going to use that term. And people bashed us. And we even had Bill Inman, who was like the father of data warehousing. He kind of said, I don't know, they think this seems stupid. But then Ali was kind of smart. We reached out to Bill Inman and kind of walked him through our logic and talked him through why the world was changing around unstructured, structured data and doing all this. Next thing you know, like 2 years later, he wrote the definitive guide, he wrote the book on Data Lakehouse, actually.
Yeah.
But so we chipped away at it, we stuck with it, but we'd also laid some groundwork with the others. So I think it's about being, provocative, conditioning around the pain, and just being really crisp on like what you're saying that's different. And then the thing that probably tipped it for us the most, though, is getting customers to talk about it. Because I would say in the early days of Data Lakehouse as a term, customers didn't want to say it. They were like nervous that they would sound silly, or that no one else was using it. They didn't want to be the first one, or that their warehousing vendor, because they also had warehousing workloads on some other vendor, whether it was the San Mateo one or like a cloud vendor or whatever. They didn't want to piss off like their other warehousing vendor. So it took a little while till we got like Shell and, I can't remember who the first others out of the gate were, probably like Capital One. Like some of our best customers started like talking about it publicly, and the next thing everyone wanted to talk about it, and next thing you know, like a year later, they're all saying they bet their business on this data platform, on Data Lakehouse. They all want to be at the front of the line saying like, we like pioneered like this thing.
That's amazing. By the way, I think your first point and your recent point about, some of the thought leaders and experts in the space were bashing you guys and saying it sounded stupid, but you stuck with it. You didn't leave the message. You didn't leave the category. You continue to educate. And then 2 years later, the guy writes the definitive guide. That's amazing.
Yeah, we leaned into the provocativeness of it, and that really got us more attention about it, actually.
Yeah, I bet. I love it. Okay, so why do I sound like that? Are we good? All right, I'm back. By the way, the CMOs didn't leave. They sort of walk out. They're on the next panel, I promise. So let's talk demand gen, pipeline.
Yeah.
So there's two parts to it that I liked about our preview. One was that, this sort of alignment against, how you wanted to look at pipeline with Ron, the leader of sales there. So just because we do get a lot of attribution questions, so you'll have to do that one. And then just like early demand gen decisions and how you guys approached it, I think would be the second. Well, they can go together.
Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I remember. Okay, so the first one was just, it's that obviously, this is obvious, but it's, I'll just underscore it, that relationship and agreement and handshake between the CMO and CRO and just all of the whole department between marketing and sales is just so essential. And I was fortunate because when I walked in, our CRO, Ron, who actually has been at the company 9 years, so 9.5, I think, he predates me. He came in and he was like, yeah, he wanted more pipeline, but he really didn't care about like, to his credit, he's like, I don't really care about thinking and spending too many cycles about where it's coming from or like source, marketing source. Because I think we all know if you live the journey that the whole idea of source or attribution, it's not perfect, it's imperfect, right? I'm not saying you should never look at attribution, but I'm saying it's imperfect. And so it was great that we were just like, yeah, how much business are we trying to do as a company? What is the conversion rates we're seeing? How much pipeline do we need? And then, okay, are we signing up for the pipeline number? And we would sign up and we would negotiate the pipeline number, but we would sign up to the whole thing and just be like, yeah, if we don't all hit this pipeline number, we don't all succeed. So we succeeded and failed together as a sales and marketing team. And I always try to remind myself, like, why is marketing even here? Like, why is Ali spending money investing in a team of people on marketing and giving me a budget? It's to make it easier to sell software. So like, we better all be successful in that regard. And then I think the second thing you're talking about is just like being like really disciplined about where you're investing demand gen dollars.
Yeah.
I think in the early going, sure, you probably need to carve out some dollars for awareness, but it's generally not going to be like a huge portion, right? You're going to do some PR or AR, what have you. but it's not going to be a huge portion of your investment. It's going to be heavy demand gen. And I think you want to be efficient with those dollars. And what I see sometimes in early stage companies is like the temptation to do a lot of conferences. And I'm generally in favor of resisting that urge. Doesn't mean I'm totally anti-conference, but sponsorships are a tough way to, like, if you really need to put results on the board around pipeline, you're waiting around until that conference happens, so like nothing's happening for many weeks, and then you're spending a lot of money potentially on the conference, or if you're not spending a lot of money, you might not stand out at the conference, depends how big it is. Might be a lot of sponsors. And then it's hard to get good ROI from it, right? So I'm not like I wouldn't say like my whole first year we did no conferences. We had to be at reInvent, so we did reInvent, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, it's a fair amount of money. But we didn't go nuts and go to lots of conferences, and I think you got to be efficient. So the digital, especially when you're early going, and you figure out you don't have like critical mass that's either necessarily at that conference, or even if you want to run your own field events, which in the long run are going to be way better ROI, but maybe you're not ready to fill a room. Your whole audience doesn't necessarily live in New York or SF, right? So people are online every day, everywhere, all over the place, especially now, post-COVID, right, where it's like people are working from wherever their company is, doesn't mean that's where they're working from. And they're searching every day, right, and they're on LinkedIn all the time. And so like, how do you reach your target audience digitally, efficiently, I think is pretty important. And so we were always just really choosy about the events we did, and I still are. I think now we're at the size where we do a fair amount of conferences, but we're still very, like, we look at all the time at, like, just to stay aware of, like, are we getting any pipeline from that conference? Are we getting good meetings with the CIOs who come to that conference, et cetera? But I'll be really careful not to go too crazy on that in the early days.
I love it. All right, so I do have a couple other questions. Before I do, with time, does anybody have questions you'd like to ask Rick? We have microphone runners. If you do, just raise your hand. Oh, right there.
Thanks. This was great. I was actually one of very early users of Databricks back in 2015 as a data scientist back then.
Oh, great.
And I love the product. My question is, with everything changing so fast in the world of AI, how's Databricks marketing keeping up with the pace of change so that you have still like a unified, consistent message, but also keep up with the market and all the changes in the market?
Yeah, good question. So just to clarify, you're asking more about how we weave it into our outward-facing marketing as opposed to how we use it?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question because when the ChatGPT thing happened and overnight, like the whole world went crazy with AI, and we were like, we did have to do some self-reflection on. We've been talking about AI. Where's everybody been? Like, we've been talking about AI for like 5-6 years. And granted, that was maybe more classic AI, which, like, in other words, machine learning, like more numerical stuff than generating novel content. But we did do some reflection, and at that time, we chose to try to create a second category, which we're in the process of trying to create, which is a superset of data lakehouse, which is called data intelligence platform. And the reason why we chose it was, even though lakehouse, the whole concept of lakehouse is you get all your different types of data together, and you can do all your analytics and all your AI workloads on the same data in the same place, it had become associated more with the data platform, and people didn't think we even did Gen AI. They're like, oh, you don't even do AI, right? So we did a couple things. One is we had acquired a company called Mosaic ML, which was very forward in the space, very at the front of all the innovation, and we kept the brand. So we have like this whole Mosaic AI. We changed it to Mosaic AI, but we kept that brand around all our AI. And we also started talking about data intelligence and explaining that while you have a lakehouse, you need to reason on your own data, and then once you reason on your data, the mic is kind of cutting in and out, isn't it? Yeah, I think these mics are cutting in and out a little bit, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. I'm loud. So anyway, we kind of took it to the next level and just evolved how you use AI on top of your data platform.
Anyone else? That was a great question. It was actually on my list before we took it out.
That's true. I think what's going on?
Right here, Maria.
Just when I think about Databricks marketing, it felt like you were in every room before you should have been. You were punching high, and it was very inspirational. Curious how you gave the team confidence, how you walked into rooms with big names when you weren't there yet.
Thank you for saying that, Maria. I would say we kind of always tried to we always tried to associate ourselves with bigger brands, because this is something I'd had I think we were able to do at Alteryx. We had some success with my prior company, where we were actually able to get a lot of mileage out of partnering with Tableau. That was like 5 years ahead of us. And it was a great partnership because we actually solved a gap that Tableau had, around data munging and stuff. And also, we were able to pull our weight. So they always, in marketing, we always pulled our own weight. So they always kind of wanted to do more with us. So I'd seen it kind of work. So Databricks, we came in and we were like, nobody knows who we are. Nobody's heard of us. We need to associate ourselves with bigger brands. Now, we had one built-in advantage, which is we had a bigger brand that we'd created in open source, which was Apache Spark. But that was a double-edged sword, to be honest with you, too, because we wanted that calling card. It did give us credibility. It allowed us sometimes to enter the room. But we also were trying to shed this idea that we were just the Spark guys, especially because Spark is a unique, without going too deep on it, Spark was kind of a unique challenge in open source. We were open core, so we're based on Spark, but it's very different than like Mongo. Let's say if you say like Mongo or MuleSoft as examples, you only think of one company, right? That was not the case with Apache Spark. So Apache Spark, like everybody had it. You could get it from Google, AWS, you could get it from Cloudera, you could get it from IBM. So, it was harder to be like, well, why do I need Spark from you? So we were trying to be way more than just the Spark guys. But we always try to associate ourselves with bigger brands in some ways, and there's lots of ways you can do it. One is just through partnerships. So we got a lot of mileage out of our Microsoft partnership. We partnered with them right as I was getting to Databricks, and we were a first-party service, and we just leaned into that, and we're like, okay, my Microsoft brand is so much bigger than us, and they're just going to be able to get us into all these Fortune 1000 companies we couldn't otherwise get into. So I would say partnerships is one way you can do it. Sometimes it's appropriate to do this, but not always. But sometimes you can do a competitive attack campaign against a bigger competitor. In fact, I think Okta has done that over many years. I think they still do it to some degree, but they were especially in the early days, they took on Microsoft in identity around Active Directory and things like that. So, I think that's one way you can do it. You can also do it through earning your reputation with big brands like Gartner, or I think G2's Sydney's on stage after me, right? Yeah. Or brands like that, or Forrester. Or you can also do it through paid. We also commission things like MIT research reports, which we're like, people aren't going to read stuff from us. They're going to read stuff from MIT, but then they get it from us. We start a conversation, So I think a lot of it was to try to associate ourselves with bigger brands, and then that eventually led into associating ourselves with big customer brands, and we would always try to get the biggest possible customer to speak for us. So even in the early going, we had like Capital One and Shell and others doing keynotes for us as well.
Amazing. All right, we can do one more question. Is that all right, team? Ooh, look at it. They got all these choices. He raised it before you. Sorry. Right there.
Hey, Rick, congrats on an amazing career, and thanks for the insights. I had a question about interacting with sales. So I come from a sales leadership background. Would love like a top three or just a little bit more of a tactic that you saw that sort of turned sales and marketing into more friends versus sort of finger pointing. If there's anything that you've got there, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we're always trying to figure out, let's have the conversation, what is it you need? What are the results we all agree we need to put on the board, and it'll vary by stage and vary by company, but is like the biggest challenge, awareness and getting, for us in the early days, and this is probably true of a lot of companies in the early days, it was like land pipeline. So we just focus on land pipeline. I would say, even though we were helping with expand deals, we didn't measure ourselves, goal ourselves, or take any credit for any of that till we were 5 years in and had a sizable install base. The first 5 years, it was land pipeline because that's what the sales needed. So if we weren't driving land pipeline, we weren't getting the job done. So we knew what results we had to put on the board. We kind of had just regular dialogue about that, about the funnel, the pipeline. And I would say, enablement, very, very early on, we leaned into a lot. That was probably another big thing, was how do we had sellers from lots of different backgrounds too. We had, did I cut out?
No, you're good.
Okay. We had sellers from like the data space who like really knew how to sell like data platforms, people who came from like, I don't know, Cloudera or AWS or what have you. And then we had people who came from more like from Zendesk or something and didn't necessarily come from the deep data back. So we had to like level set. So we spent a lot of cycles on like making sure we all told the story like the same way and did sales enablement. And then I think the third thing that the team needed was just air cover, like awareness. And so we leaned a lot into things like Gartner too, and trying to establish our market position so that we had credibility with decision makers as well.
All right. How about a big round of applause for Rick Schultz?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out, man. I really appreciate that. That was amazing.